Before every phone was a glass rectangle, there was a chunky little brick in your pocket, plastic, loud, and weirdly comforting. You probably own a Nokia, maybe a 3310, the one that survived drops, pockets full of keys, and whatever else life threw at it. You played Snake on a tiny screen. You swapped the battery in 10 seconds. The ringtone was iconic before iconic was a marketing word. Calls were clear. The battery lasted for days. And for a while, Nokia was not just a brand. It was what a phone was supposed to be. From Europe to India to Africa, Nokia was the default. Not luxury, not niche, just everywhere. And then, in roughly one product cycle, the company that made more phones than anyone else lost the market it helped invent. When Nokia fell, everyone had the same villain ready. Apple showed up, touchscreens won, game over. And yes, the iPhone mattered. But if that is the whole story, you are missing the part that actually killed them, inside their own software organization. This is how Nokia built the best hardware machine on earth. Watch the smartphone become a software business and bet the company on the wrong platform. I got the graphs and the memo that called Nokia's own strategy a burning platform. Let's rewind. Nokia does not start as a phone company. It starts in 1865 as a Finnish pulp mill on the Nokia Inverter River. Over decades, it expands into rubber, cables, and electronics, a Finnish conglomerate doing a little bit of everything. In 1967, those businesses merge into Nokia Corporation. Still not the Nokia in your memory, but getting closer. By the early 90s, leadership makes a sharp bet. Get out of the side businesses and go all in on mobile telecommunications. In 1991, the first GSM call is made on Nokia network equipment in Finland, and Nokia is suddenly on the ground floor of a global standard. That matters because GSM was not just a phone. It was the rails every carrier would run on, and Nokia was building the rails and the trains. Here is what Nokia got terrifyingly right. While rivals treated phones like gadgets, Nokia treated them like logistics. Design a handful of platforms, source at massive volume, ship reliable hardware to carriers on every continent. A cheap Nokia for emerging markets, a mid-range Nokia for Europe, a flagship Nokia for people who wanted a camera that actually worked. By 2007, Nokia was selling roughly 4 out of every 10 mobile phones on the planet. A market share number that sounds made up because it basically was. Think of it like owning the shelf in every phone shop on Earth. Not because the phone was magical, but because the machine behind it was. Carriers loved Nokia because customers trusted the name. Governments loved Nokia because it was a national champion. Investors loved Nokia because the growth never seemed to stop. Revenue climbed into the tens of billions of euros. At the peak, Nokia was not just Finland's biggest company. It was one of the most valuable brands in technology. For 20 years, the moat was hardware excellence. Radios that worked, batteries that lasted, and a supply chain that could flood the world with reliable plastic. If you lived through the 2000s, Nokia was not a brand you debated. It was infrastructure like electricity, but pocket-sized. But this next part is where it actually gets dangerous, because the product stopped being a phone and started being a computer with an app store. In 2007, Apple ships the iPhone, not just a better phone, but a touch interface with a developer platform hiding inside it. Suddenly the question was not who makes the toughest keypad. It was who owns the software ecosystem that keeps you from switching. Nokia's answer was Symbian, an operating system it helped champion, but one that had grown into a maze of versions, forks, and carrier customizations. Imagine trying to ship one app that runs on 50 slightly different Symbian builds. That is not a platform. That is a part-time job. Inside Nokia, teams are not aligned on one future. Symbian phones, Linux experiments, touchscreen prototypes, multiple platforms competing for the same budget. Then Google gives the industry an escape hatch. Android, free, familiar, and backed by a growing app store that developers actually wanted to build for. Samsung, HTC, and LG could slap Android on good hardware and ride the app wave. Nokia still had the volume, but the software story was slipping. Think of it like a theme park. Apple and Google were building roller coasters and inviting developers to add new rides. Nokia was still selling excellent tickets to a parking lot. Nokia launched responses, touch screens, app stores, new flagships, but each one arrived a beat late, and the beats were getting faster. In 2010, Nokia hires a new CEO, Stephen Alab, a Microsoft executive, to do the thing boards love: one clear decision, fast. Months later, he sent a memo employees still quote, Nokia was standing on a burning platform and had to jump to something new. The jump was not Android. It was a deep partnership with Microsoft and Windows Phone. One ecosystem bet instead of 3 internal wars. On paper, it almost made sense. Nokia builds gorgeous hardware, Microsoft supplies the OS, carriers get a third alternative to Apple and Google. The Lumia phones were genuinely good, especially the cameras. I'm not here to pretend Nokia forgot how to build a device. The catch was the store. Developers follow users, users follow apps, and Windows Phone was always the third door in a 2-door market. Platform businesses are cruel. Being almost good enough is not a strategy. It is a waiting room for obsolescence. Nokia had been working on its own Linux-based path, MeeGo, and effectively shelved it to go all in on Microsoft. One bet, no parachute. So here's the real issue. Nokia did not lose because it could not see smartphones coming. It lost because it could not turn a hardware empire into a software platform fast enough. Remember that chart from Act 2 that stopped at the peak? Here is what came next, from roughly 40% to single digits in a few brutal years. By 2012, Android and iOS had already eaten the ecosystem. Symbian, once the giant, was a footnote. Windows Phone was fighting for scraps. In 2013, Nokia agreed to sell its phone business to Microsoft for roughly 5.4 billion euros, a fire sale for a division that had defined a company. Thousands of jobs gone, factories restructured. The company that put a phone in every pocket was, for the first time, not really a phone company. Microsoft eventually wrote down the acquisition, discontinued Lumia, and exited phones, which tells you how the bet ended, not how it started. The cruel twist: Nokia's hardware teams were still competitive. The market had simply moved the finish line to software, and Nokia arrived with a beautiful device and an empty app store. Nokia did not vanish. It shrank, pivoted, and rebuilt around network infrastructure, the towers and routers that make your phone work at all. Today, Nokia is a B2B technology company, 5G equipment, enterprise software, a very different animal from the candy bar in your teenage pocket. The Nokia name eventually returned on phones through a licensing deal, new Android devices, different owner, same nostalgia, font on the box. The lesson is not that Nokia was stupid. It was brilliant at the old game, and the game changed while the org chart was still fighting itself. That is exactly why this story still scares executives. The disruption often starts as a software layer on top of the product you already sell. So let me ask you, could Nokia have jumped to Android in 2010 and kept the crown, or was the internal culture already too fragmented? Was the Microsoft bet rational desperation, or the one move guaranteed to finish third in a 2-horse race? Tell me in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, you know what to do.